I never imagined that after 38 years of marriage, the most dangerous thing my wife would leave behind wasn't money, or a house, or a will. It was a phone. A small, black phone, hidden so carefully that I almost missed it. And when I turned it on, the woman I thought I knew vanished forever. My name is Richard Coleman. I'm 64 years old. For most of my life, I believed I was a lucky man. Loyal wife. Quiet home. No drama. No secrets. Or so I thought. Before I continue, let me say this. If stories about family, betrayal, and late-life truth resonate with you, please subscribe to this channel. And while you're listening, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, and whether you've ever discovered something about someone you love that changed everything. Because what I found came after it was already too late to ask her why. My wife, Eleanor, died on a Tuesday morning. A heart attack, they said. Sudden. Clean. No suffering. That's the word the doctor used, clean. 38 years together, and her death was described in a single sentence. I remember standing in the hospital hallway, staring at a beige wall, thinking how strange it was that the world hadn't stopped. Nurses kept walking. Phones kept ringing. Somewhere, a vending machine hummed like nothing had happened. I went home alone that night. The house felt wrong without her voice. No television noise. No clatter from the kitchen. Just silence, thick and heavy, pressing down on my chest. For the first week, I didn't touch her things. I slept on my side of the bed. I drank my coffee from my old mug. I didn't open her closet. Didn't move her shoes. It felt like erasing her, and I wasn't ready. People came and went. Neighbors. Distant relatives. Friends who said the same things in different voices. She loved you so much, Richard. You were a wonderful husband. She was lucky to have you. I nodded. I smiled when expected. I thanked them. Inside, I was numb. The funeral was quiet. Eleanor always hated attention. Even in death, she didn't draw much of it. A small service. Simple flowers. No surprises. At least, that's what I thought. It was 3 days after the funeral when I decided to clean out her nightstand. Not because I was ready, but because I couldn't stand looking at it anymore. Her lamp. Her book. That drawer she always kept locked. Yes. Locked. For nearly 4 decades, Eleanor had one drawer I never opened. I asked once, years ago, half joking, "What's in there, state secrets?" She smiled. Calm. Warm. Just old things. Nothing you'd want. And I trusted her. I always trusted her. The key was taped under the drawer. That alone should have warned me. My hands trembled as I opened it, expecting letters, maybe jewelry, something sentimental. Instead, I found nothing. Almost nothing. Just a thin notebook. Blank pages. And a phone. Not her phone. I knew her phone. I paid the bill. I charged it every night on her side of the bed. This one was different. No case. No scratches. Turned completely off. For a long moment, I just stared at it. I told myself it was probably old. A backup. Maybe she forgot about it. That lie lasted exactly 6 seconds. Because when I pressed the power button, the screen lit up instantly. Fully charged. My heart sank. You don't keep a fully charged phone hidden for no reason. The lock screen didn't have her picture. It had a city skyline. One I didn't recognize. No passcode. She never needed to hide it from me. She never expected me to find it. The first notification loaded before I even touched anything. A message preview. I miss you already. Last night meant everything. I sat down hard on the bed. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to breathe. 38 years, Richard. Don't jump to conclusions. I opened the messages. There were hundreds. Months. Maybe years worth. Different numbers at first, until I realized they all belonged to the same person. Saved under a single name. Short. Simple. Careful. I read without blinking. Plans. Jokes. Arguments. Apologies. Intimacy. Words my wife had never spoken to me, not like this. Not in years. My chest burned. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. There were photos. Not explicit. Worse. Photos of her smiling in places I'd never been with her. Restaurants she never mentioned. Views from balconies I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. A picture of her reflection in a mirror. Behind her, a window. Floor-to-ceiling glass. High-rise. City lights. My hands clenched around the phone. Eleanor hated heights. Or at least, that's what she told me. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I did what I'd done my whole life, I observed. I paid attention. Because if there was one thing 38 years had taught me, it was this. People reveal themselves eventually. You just have to be patient enough to watch. The phone had a notes app. One note. Recently edited. An address. No name. No explanation. Just an address. I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote it down on a piece of paper and folded it carefully, like it might explode if I wasn't gentle. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, listening to the house creak and settle, wondering how long I'd been living with a stranger. By morning I knew one thing for certain. My wife didn't just leave me memories. She left me a trail. And I was finally ready to follow it. I drove for nearly an hour before the city skyline finally appeared. The address Eleanor had saved led me downtown, into a part of the city she always claimed made her nervous. Too loud. Too crowded. Too many strangers. Another lie. The building stood tall and quiet, all glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like it had nothing to hide. Luxury. Security desk. Valet parking. The kind of place you don't accidentally end up in. I sat in my car across the street for a long time. My hands rested on the steering wheel, stiff, like they belonged to someone else. I kept thinking that if I waited long enough, the address would change. That this was all some mistake I could drive away from. But the paper in my pocket didn't disappear. Neither did the phone. Eventually, I got out. The lobby smelled like polished stone and expensive perfume. A young man in a suit sat behind the desk, barely glancing up as I approached. "I'm here to see Eleanor Coleman," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth. Past tense still hadn't settled in my bones yet. The man typed something, frowned slightly, then looked back at me. "May I ask who you are, sir?" "My husband." He paused. Just a fraction too long. Then he nodded. "Of course." One moment. That pause told me more than any message ever could. He handed me a keycard. "Penthouse B. Elevator to the right." "Penthouse." I thanked him and walked away slowly, my legs heavy with every step. Inside the elevator, I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall. 64 years old. Gray hair. Wrinkles earned honestly. A man who had spent his life believing in quiet loyalty. The elevator climbed higher. With every floor, my chest tightened. When the doors finally opened, the hallway was empty. Plush carpet. Soft lighting. Absolute silence. Penthouse B stood at the end. I unlocked the door. The apartment opened into sunlight and space. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A wide living area with modern furniture, clean lines, neutral colors, nothing personal left behind. But it was lived in. There were books on the table. A jacket draped over a chair. 2 coffee cups in the sink. 2. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The city stretched below like a painting. Cars moving silently. People unaware that my entire life had just shifted its foundation. I walked slowly, touching nothing at first. This wasn't Eleanor's style. She preferred warmth. Clutter. Memories. This place was designed to impress, not to comfort. On the kitchen counter, I found mail. All addressed to her. A different name. Eleanor Wright. My knees nearly gave out. Wright wasn't her maiden name. It wasn't mine. I sat down hard on the couch, the envelope shaking in my hand. Who were you? I moved through the apartment carefully now, like I was afraid of waking something. The bedroom was immaculate. The bed made. 2 pillows. The closet told the real story. Men's clothes. Not old. Not forgotten. Recently worn. Shoes that weren't mine. Jackets that smelled faintly of a cologne Eleanor once told me she hated. I stood there, holding a shirt that still held warmth, and felt something finally crack inside my chest. Not heartbreak. Clarity. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a life. On the nightstand sat another phone charger. Empty. I returned to the living room and pulled Eleanor's hidden phone from my pocket. Back to the messages. M. had sent one the night before she died. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't worry. Everything's almost in place. Almost in place. I searched the apartment for paperwork. Files. Anything. In a drawer beneath the desk, I found a folder. Inside were bank statements. Accounts I'd never seen. Amounts that made my stomach turn. Transfers. Monthly. Large. From accounts in my name. I felt sick. Careful withdrawals. Spread out. Designed not to trigger alarms. She had been taking from me. From us. There was more. A document draft. And signed. A will. Not the one we shared. This one left everything, to Michael Wright. I whispered the name out loud. Michael. The apartment suddenly felt smaller. A sound came from the hallway outside. Footsteps. I froze. Keys jingled. The door handle turned. I didn't move. The door opened, and a man stepped inside. Mid-40s. Well-dressed. Confident posture. He stopped short when he saw me standing there. Who the hell are you? He demanded. I looked at him calmly. I could ask you the same question. His eyes flicked to the phone in my hand. Recognition. Fear. You're Richard, he said slowly. My name sounded bitter on his tongue. So you do know who I am, I replied. He straightened, forcing confidence back into his voice. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I laughed. A quiet sound. Hollow. Oh, I don't think so. He glanced around the room, then back at me. She didn't tell me you'd come. No, I said. She didn't tell me much at all. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he sighed and dropped his keys on the table. Look, he said, rubbing his face. Eleanor was complicated. I stared at him. She was my wife. His eyes hardened. She was my partner. That word burned. For how long? I asked. He hesitated. 6 years. 6 years? While I cooked dinners. While I paid bills. While I held her hand at night, believing in the lie we shared. And you knew she was married? I said. Yes. And you didn't care? He shrugged slightly. She said you understood? That you were comfortable. I stepped closer. I buried her last week. That shook him. His bravado faltered. She said she was going to tell you, he muttered. After everything was settled. I smiled thinly. That phrase again. He swallowed. Richard, listen. Eleanor loved you. Just differently. I nodded slowly. I believe that's what she told herself. He gestured around the apartment. This was our future. She was planning to leave. We were waiting for the right time. The room went very quiet. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded paper. The address. You're standing in the middle of it, I said. His face paled. You don't understand. he said quickly. She had plans. Investments. This was just one piece. I turned and walked toward the door. Enjoy the view, I said. It won't last. He laughed nervously. You think you can do something about this? I stopped and looked back at him. I've already started. As I rode the elevator down, I didn't feel rage. I felt resolve. They thought I was an old man who wouldn't notice, who wouldn't understand, who wouldn't act. They were wrong. Eleanor had spent years planning a future without me. Now it was my turn to plan what came next. And unlike her, I wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating anyone. I didn't go home after leaving the building. Instead, I drove aimlessly, letting the city swallow me whole. Traffic lights blurred together. Horns honked. People lived their lives, unaware that mine had split clean down the middle. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger makes you reckless. And recklessness was a luxury I couldn't afford. What I felt was something sharper. Focus. I parked near the river and sat there for nearly an hour, replaying every word Michael had said. Every careless admission. Every lie Eleanor must have fed him to keep both lives running side by side. 6 years? 6 years of planning. She didn't just betray me emotionally. She studied me. Learned my routines. My blind spots. She knew exactly how much she could take, and when. The realization hurt more than the affair. I finally drove home as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and red. Eleanor would have liked that. She always said sunsets reminded her that endings could be beautiful. I wondered now if she believed her ending would be. That night, I opened my laptop for the first time since her death. I logged into our bank accounts. Not hers. Mine. Accounts I trusted because I had built them slowly, carefully, over decades of work. Savings. Investments. Retirement funds. At first glance, everything looked normal. That was the most disturbing part. Only when I pulled statements from years back and laid them side by side did the pattern emerge. Small withdrawals. Transfers broken into pieces. Always under-reporting thresholds. Always timed when I was traveling or distracted. She'd been siphoning money out of my life like air from a tire, slow enough that I never noticed the deflation until the ride failed. By morning I had spreadsheets. By noon I had proof. By evening I had something better. Leverage. The will she'd drafted but never signed? Legally useless. The accounts in her other name? Traceable. The penthouse? Rented, not owned. Everything she thought was secure rested on one assumption. That I would never look. I made my first call the next day. Not to a lawyer. To an old friend. His name was Thomas Green. We'd worked together decades ago before he went into financial forensics. The kind of man who enjoyed finding what others worked hard to bury. When he answered, his voice was steady. Richard? I heard about Eleanor. I'm sorry. Thank you, I said. I need a favor. There was a pause. What kind? The kind that requires discretion. Another pause. Longer this time. Come by my office. I brought everything. Bank statements. Copies of messages. Photos. The alternate ID Eleanor had used. The draft will. Thomas didn't interrupt as he reviewed it all. His face stayed neutral, but his eyes sharpened. Finally, he leaned back. She was careful, he said. But not careful enough. My jaw tightened. What does that mean? It means she crossed lines she shouldn't have, he replied. And she left fingerprints everywhere. I exhaled slowly. And Michael? Thomas gave a thin smile. He's exposed. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because the pain was gone, but because I had direction. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my role. The grieving husband. I answered calls. I accepted condolences. I thanked people for casseroles and sympathy cards. I said nothing about the penthouse. Nothing about Michael. Nothing about the money. Michael, meanwhile, grew careless. He texted Eleanor's hidden phone repeatedly. No replies. He called. Voicemails piled up. I let them. Finally, he sent one last message. If you're gone, I need to know what to do. The accounts are frozen. Frozen. I smiled for the first time in a long while. Thomas had moved quietly, alerting the right institutions with the right evidence. Not accusations. Questions. Banks don't like unanswered questions. Especially when large sums and false identities are involved. Michael showed up at my house 3 days later. Unannounced. I watched him through the window before opening the door. He looked different now. Less polished. Tired. The confidence he'd worn like a tailored suit had frayed at the edges. Richard, he said, forcing politeness. We need to talk. I stepped aside. He entered cautiously, glancing around like the walls themselves might be listening. They locked me out of everything, he said, running a hand through his hair. Eleanor promised. She promised a lot of things. I interrupted calmly. He stopped pacing. You did this, he said. Not a question. I corrected it, I replied. He scoffed. You can't just take it all. It was never yours. He leaned forward. She was leaving you. Eventually, I said. After she took enough to feel safe. His jaw clenched. She loved me. I studied him. She loved what you represented, I said quietly. An escape. A fantasy. You were convenient. That hit him harder than shouting ever could. He straightened. You think you've won? He asked. You think freezing accounts is revenge? No, I said. That was step one. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I reached into a drawer and placed a folder on the table. He stared at it but didn't open it. What's that? He asked. Documentation, I replied. Of fraud. Identity misuse. Financial manipulation. Color drained from his face. You wouldn't, he whispered. I already have. Silence filled the room. Finally, he spoke. She said you were harmless? I smiled gently. That was her final mistake. He left shortly after. No threats. No shouting. Just fear. And fear, I'd learned, was far more powerful. That evening, I walked through my house and noticed things I hadn't before. A loose floorboard. A locked cabinet in the garage Eleanor had insisted was just tools. Inside, I found a metal box. Another phone. This one older. Messages dated back over a decade. Different names. Different men. My knees weakened. Michael wasn't the first. He was just the one who stayed. I sat on the garage floor for a long time, holding the phone like it might burn me. 38 years. How many nights had she come home smiling, carrying secrets heavier than any bag? I didn't cry. I felt finished. Finished being fooled. Finished being quiet. Finished believing age made me weak. The next step wasn't about money. It was about truth. And I knew exactly where to deliver it. The truth has weight. Once you carry it long enough, you realize it doesn't just crush you, it reshapes you. I woke before sunrise the next morning with a single thought repeating in my head. This ends now. Not with shouting. Not with revenge that would satisfy my anger for a moment and destroy me forever. But with exposure. I showered, dressed carefully, and made coffee I didn't drink. My hands were steady now. That surprised me. Grief had sharpened into something colder, more precise. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from an attorney named Laura Bennett. She specialized in estates and financial misconduct. Thomas had recommended her with one warning. She doesn't waste words. He was right. She read through everything without expression. When she finished, she closed the folder and folded her hands. Your wife committed long-term financial fraud, she said plainly. And Mr. Wright was a beneficiary. Is he legally responsible? I asked. She tilted her head slightly. That depends on what he knew. I slid another envelope across the desk. Phone records. Messages. Photos. Laura exhaled slowly. He knew enough. I nodded. And the reputation? I asked. She met my eyes. That's up to you. Reputation? Eleanor's image had been flawless. Charity events. Church fundraisers. Book clubs. Friends who spoke about her kindness like it was a fact carved into stone. I wondered how many of them would recognize the woman I now knew. By afternoon, the first letters went out. Not accusations. Requests. Banks. Legal offices. Investment firms. Carefully worded notifications accompanied by documentation. The kind that force people to ask questions. By evening, the phone rang. Eleanor's sister. Her voice was strained. Richard, she said, people are calling me. Asking strange things. I imagine they are, I replied gently. What's happening? She demanded. I paused. Eleanor had secrets. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. What kind of secrets? The kind that don't stay buried. She hung up. The next call came from someone else. A woman I didn't recognize. My name is Helen, she said. I think we need to talk about your wife. I closed my eyes. You're not the first today, I said. She hesitated. I knew her as Nora. Different name. Same pattern. We met the following morning at a quiet cafe. Helen was in her late 50s. Well-dressed. Nervous hands. She said she was divorced, Helen told me. We were together for 3 years. 3. I nodded. She was very convincing, Helen added softly. I believed her. By the end of the week, there were 4 more. Men. Women. All stories different in detail, identical in structure. Alternate names. Promises of futures. Carefully timed distance. She had lived a web of lies so intricate that even now, unraveling it felt unreal. Michael tried to call again. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched. His name appeared in places it hadn't before. Legal notices. Bank flags. Quiet rumors circulating through the circles Eleanor once curated so carefully. The church postponed a memorial donation in her name. The book club canceled its annual event. Silence speaks volumes. Then came the letter. A formal request for deposition. Michael was being investigated. He showed up at my door one last time. This time, he didn't knock. He rang the bell and stood back, like a man expecting to be bitten. You've ruined everything, he said the moment I opened the door. I looked at him calmly. You built everything on stolen ground. She promised me security, he snapped. She said you'd never fight back? I nodded slowly. She misunderstood me. He stepped closer. You think exposing her makes you righteous? No, I said. It makes me free. That stopped him. For the first time, he saw me, not as an obstacle, not as a fool, but as someone who was done playing a role. You could have walked away, he said quietly. So could she, I replied. He left without another word. The fallout continued. Nothing dramatic. No headlines. Just doors closing. Accounts sealed. Invitations rescinded. Eleanor's name slowly fading from conversations where it once drew admiration. I attended a small gathering her friends had organized, a final remembrance. They spoke kindly. Fondly. I listened. When it was my turn, I stood. My wife was many things, I said evenly. And like all of us, she was flawed. I stopped there. Truth doesn't need decoration. Afterward, one woman pulled me aside. You're handling this with such grace, she whispered. I smiled faintly. Grace was a luxury earned through suffering. That night, I returned to the penthouse. Michael had moved out. The place felt hollow now. I stood by the window, looking out at the city Eleanor had chosen for her second life. I didn't feel hatred. I felt closure approaching. There was one last thing left to do. Not for revenge. For myself. I went home and opened Eleanor's final letter. The one she'd addressed to me but never sent. It had been tucked inside a book on her nightstand, the margins worn like she'd read it often. Richard, if you're reading this, then I waited too long. I told myself every day that I'd tell you the truth. I always found a reason not to. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope you understand that I was afraid of losing the life I built with you. And the one I built without you. My hands didn't shake. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the book. Understanding doesn't require acceptance. And love doesn't excuse betrayal. I turned off the light and went to bed knowing the storm was almost over. The final choice, mine alone, waited just ahead. The morning I made my final decision, the house felt lighter. Not empty, lighter. Like something heavy had finally been carried out, leaving clean air behind. I stood in the kitchen holding Eleanor's letter one last time. I read it slowly, not to feel pain, but to be certain. She had loved me. That much was true. But love without honesty is just a comfortable lie. And lies, no matter how gently told, always charge interest. I placed the letter back in the book and slid it onto the shelf. Not destroyed. Not hidden. Just finished. By noon, I was back at Laura Bennett's office. She looked up as I entered, already knowing why I was there. "You're ready," she said. "Yes," I replied. "End it." She nodded. The remaining actions were methodical. Clean. Final. I signed documents transferring disputed funds back into protected accounts. I authorized disclosures where necessary. I declined to pursue personal civil action against Michael beyond what was already in motion. Laura paused, pen hovering. "You're sure?" she asked. "You could press harder." "I'm sure," I said. "Revenge isn't about how much damage you cause. It's about deciding when to stop letting damage define you. Michael's downfall didn't come with drama. It came with silence. Partners distanced themselves. Opportunities vanished. Legal pressure tightened, not crushing, but constant. The kind that keeps a man awake at night, replaying choices he can't undo. He sent one final message to Eleanor's old phone. I read it once. "I didn't think it would end like this." Neither did I. I didn't reply. Some conversations don't deserve closure. A month later, I returned to the penthouse for the last time. The lease had ended. The space was nearly empty now. Just echoes and sunlight. I walked through each room slowly, not as a husband betrayed, but as a man reclaiming himself. At the window, I paused. Eleanor had loved this view because it made her feel untouchable. Above consequences. Above truth. I understood now. But I also understood something she never did. No height is high enough to escape who you are. I left the keys on the counter, and walked away without looking back. The house I shared with Eleanor slowly became mine again. I repainted the bedroom. I moved the furniture. I planted a tree in the backyard where she'd once said, "Maybe someday." Someday had arrived, just not the way she imagined. Friends noticed the change. "You seem lighter," one said. I smiled. "I am." They didn't ask questions. People sense when a story is finished. On a quiet afternoon, I received a call from Helen, the woman from the cafe. "I just wanted to thank you," she said, "for telling the truth." "You didn't owe me thanks," I replied. "Maybe not," she